Thanks for staying with us. As the 2023 elections tribunals see it across the country, apart from issues of election rigging, one issue that seems common in many tribunals is the allegations of certificate forgery. The issue is becoming rampant in many of the tribunals. There are allegations in Enugu, in Lagos, and many other states. The question is, how rampant is certificate forgery in Nigeria? How are many politicians facing allegations of fake certificates? What is the impact of this trend on democracy and development in Nigeria? And a Rise analyst, Associate Professor of Law, Sam Amadi, joins us now in the studios to look at this disturbing trend in Nigeria's democracy. Very disturbing. I mean, when somebody seeks leadership, it should come with clean hands.
And should come with the right statements. Again, the real problem here is, you see, you don't necessarily have to be educated or certificated to be a good leader. So people argue. People like John Major maybe had diploma. People like Thatcher. Of course, we've had those who went to Oxford.
Thatcher went to Oxford.
Those who went to Oxford had PPE, philosophy, politics, and
no,
economics.
when you look at the British prime ministers, it's Oxford or Cambridge.
Exactly. A few have not made it there. But the key point is that it's different from saying, I possess a certificate and you don't have it. Now, in the beginning of this republic, we had a young, charismatic young man called Salihu Buhari.
Absolutely.
Who showed
the first speaker of
the House of Reps.
Yeah.
Showed all the smart trend of a great guy, obeying, sophisticated, handsome, everything. But one problem, he claimed he had University of Toronto degree, and he didn't have. We saw Evan and when
he had only school certificate, but he was piloting the House of Reps
until he was ousted. Okay. Yeah. Evan and when just S. They said, he got.
Well, when stated it, of blessed memory, said whether you call it Evans or Evan, but anyone is his name.
That guy got him off. No, the whole idea is that the Constitution, the basis of law itself, the basis of contract, is the confidence we have in documentation. So if you say, look, I want to sell this car, and you provide a car ownership title, people trust that it's issued from a particular office of titles. They buy into it. Democracy is also built around promise, trust, public trust. So the moment certificates do not convey what they say, it's bad for democracy, it's bad for economics. So we talk about rule of law. The whole idea of rule of law is the fact that when you present a documentation,
it's to conform. Conformity.
What it says is what is on the face value. So it's getting worrisome that in Nigeria today, not just for politicians, we've seen rising spate of certificate forgery. I've heard some people talk about some professors doing their verification. They discovered that they probably didn't have WAEC before they got, however, they got a BSc.
They probably did exam success.
So whatever, correspondence. But the point is that the Constitution, and now we're getting to see in these tribunals several issues of certificate forgery, whether of age, NYSC, degrees.
But they've not been proven, no. They're just the allegations.
Now the point is that, of course, we've seen what happened with Bayelsa in 2019.
Oh, yes.
When
that was
the
proven.
Court
the court proved it. Yes.
So the question I ask ourselves, why do we have to have this level of allegations of certificate forgery? We saw also Kemi, who said, look, yes, I didn't do this thing, but they gave
somebody
me this,
gave me this.
So we used to hear about Oluwole. Now the problem is, somebody wrote a book about the best democracy money can buy. People are saying this is the best democracy that fraud can buy. So we have many people who are running for public office being challenged on the basis of certificate forgery, fake certificate, whether it's age declaration, whether it's the
school they attended.
It raises question as to how do we trust both what people in government do. How do we trust that what they say is what they're going to do? And basically, it knocks off. That's what the Constitution says, that any such forgery, fake certification, disqualifies it or should lead to disqualification. Because the essence of democracy is that the people should trust the process. And again, the question they ask, how come INEC does not, and that's a problem. You see, in the US and elsewhere, if you want to file to be a candidate, you file to the Electoral Commission. You file all your papers, file everything. Even before your party nominates you, those verifications, they look at your residence, for example, if places where there's residence requirement, if you've not stayed up to that residence, they disqualify you. There was a famous New York Times columnist who was to run for Virginia, I think, governor of the Democratic Party. He resigned from his New York Times position. Went to set up a committee.
To Virginia.
Virginia, absolutely. So he sends in his papers. And the verification says you didn't meet.
He didn't live in Virginia for this period.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, he was living in New York. Which is just.
So you don't need to go to court. The commission removes you. So the problem is that why didn't INEC conduct this kind of due diligence? You see, the idea of filing your papers to INEC as a nominee is that INEC triggers off due process. If you are not satisfied with that disqualification, you go to court. But what we have seen that INEC played dead brain all through, got everything in, and now the courts are now, people are elected, people are sitting in office.
The courts are now inundated with
allegations that should have been sorted out.
out.
Before people emerge, and again, the parties do their screening. The question is, what do they screen? I went for one of those screening. They will tell you to bring a certificate. So the idea is that they would have done some due diligence. It's okay, because they want to make sure that the candidate they take to the election is a candidate that can stand the rigor, the scrutiny of both INEC and post-election the court. So there's a sense in which our society is now too tolerant of fake certificates. Somebody has done some analysis and said, look, it's possible that close to 50% of the certificates people present in different domains of existence, whether it's civil service, whether for recruitment, whether for election, may be fake. We've seen lawyers, we've seen people who are fake lawyers. They practice for 30 years. We've seen doctors, people who have claimed to be medical doctors.
Practice for several years until they are uncovered.
So it's now a menace. That's the point.
Yeah.
And should be now viewed by the court and by society and all regulators as a serious crisis.
By security agents as well.
It's a security crisis, because imagine when people claim certification for what they don't have. Pilots, for example. I mean, imagine somebody who's a pilot and then claims to be a pilot for many years with certificates and is hired, and it takes Boeing 757 with everybody on board. I mean, it's hard to imagine what it is. So that's the equivalent of tolerating fake certificates
in other areas.
And that's why it's, as a matter of law, the Constitution views it as a disabling event. And so what we are seeing now is asking ourselves, what can be done to stop this spate? If people get away with fake certificates of all dimensions, then it creates an incentive structure for people to imagine that they could just craft any certificate and use it.
Okay, yes. While agreeing with you, we know a precedent was set, in the law courts, even decided at the Supreme Court, the Bayelsa State case, about 4 years ago.
Absolutely.
Lion, do you think if a situation like that, like we're seeing, across the country, amongst politicians before the tribunals, would they be able to uphold that judgment and,
the good thing about the Supreme Court judgment, of course, we've seen some incoherent departures, but the good thing about a Supreme Court judgment is that it's binding. Tribunal Court of Appeal. Now, the reason why the Supreme Court will depart from its previous decision is that it's rendered in error. One, that the law has changed. Nothing has changed. The same constitutional prohibition against certificate forgery exists. Nothing has changed in logic or in law to make any court in Nigeria not disqualify any candidate who presents a fake. And again, the presumption when the issuing authority says this is not from us, for example, let's say you claim to have gone to University of Lagos.
One is already, before the tribunal, the issue of NYSC certificates.
Once NYSC discounts that certification, only on you to show why the court will not accept, because this is the issue agent. It's just like me now. He wrote to Harvard University and said, Sam Amadi says he's a PhD holder from Harvard. This is my certificate.
From Harvard Law School.
And the Harvard Law School says, we never knew this guy. And they say, look, he wasn't our student. We didn't issue this certificate.
That's pronto.
Exactly. It's on me now to debunk a heavy presumption that
how are you going to debunk that when the school that you claim to have attended is saying no?
The President of the Court of Appeal should issue a judicial direction to tribunals.
Yes.
Zero tolerance for certificates forgery of all types. Once a candidate has shown that the candidate does not possess the certificate he entered, nobody forces you to enter a certificate. You could jolly well put school cert, attempted school cert, failed FF9 school cert. It doesn't disqualify for being a president or a governor or anything. But once you have put that certificate and it's not true, there should be no second guessing. It should be knocked off. Because, you see, this is about the moral order of a society is actually the springboard for its economic and social development. Yeah. And people discount the modeling power of, and changes occur in hierarchical society, but top down, not bottom up. You see, so Nigeria will change. It won't change by the struggling of daily people in the street. It will change more by the modeling top down. So when people who are in authority display crash insensitivity, immorality, and impunity to fake all kinds of certificates. Some people who didn't go to primary school have PhDs. You are modeling downwards that level of immorality and rule of law, recklessness and lawlessness. And so it's why the Supreme Court argued that the court has a moral responsibility to protect the ethics, public ethics. And the Chapter 2 of the Constitution says that public integrity, public ethics, is the order of Nigerian governance. Yeah. They located ethics and anti-corruption. And the Supreme Court argued in the case against ICC that it's part of the responsibility of the courts and all the branches of government to promote anti-corruption. And so I think it should be a judicial direction to say, look, you know what, we don't care about each of the facts, but anywhere we smell fake certificates, forgery, that is disabling. Immediately we strike you out, because the essence of the Constitution and why the Electoral Act is that people who vie for public office must first possess the qualification for the office that they seek to occupy. And that qualification isn't a matter of convenience or a matter of...
It's a matter of purity.
Purity of the law. Yeah. So whether you scored 100 million votes, if you miss that qualification, you should be off. Whether you're going to have a magic wand to solve all the problems, the simple test for the court is say, did this person fail the integrity test, the qualification test? He is not qualified for the office, and he presented, or she presented, a certificate that is not true, and therefore misrepresented himself or herself. And in contract law, misrepresentation is a void. It voids transaction. It's substantial that it voids even marriage. So when you contract a marriage by gross misrepresentation, it's a void marriage. It's not even just voidable. It's void. So that expresses how the law views, forgery, because essentially forgery misstates what it is, and because of that misstatement, the other parties acted wrongly, and therefore the law presumes that the person who misstates the facts through fake certification should forfeit that position because he has transgressed a fundamental law of corporate life. Without that integrity, we can't give ourselves promises, and there should be no contracts, no transactions, and no economic development. Basic. So that's really why it's important to get this right.
Yes, indeed. You've spoken like the real Harvard scholar here, and they are rights analysts.
And it has practical implication for everyday life.
Everything, absolutely. I mean,
just like the pilot who could, or the doctor who claims he can't do operation.
I don't think that will happen in the aviation industry.
Well, we see doctors, we see lawyers, and all kinds of people who pretend what they're not. And that's why the Constitution says, if you do that, then you have crossed the line.
Yes.
And that's what the Supreme Court in the Baisa case.
Absolutely.
So the question is, with all these spits, all these so many cases around the tribunal, we'll watch and see how the courts
would
react. But the precedent
absolutely
is there, and they should follow that precedent.
Absolutely. Thanks so very much, Associate Professor of Law, Sam Amadi, and Arise analyst who are coming to shed light on this.